Hello viewers, welcome back to the channel. Today we are starting another unit in your subject law of real estate. So this is mentioned in your IBBI syllabus. You can see rent control laws section pertaining to occupancy rights of tenants, freezing of rent, protection against eviction of tenants, and its effect on value of property. So, this all we have to cover. We will see one by one. So, today's topic of discussion is introduction of Rent Control Act and history of Rent Control Act. Then we will see a need for controlling rent and various provisions of Rent Control Act as applicable to state of Maharashtra. So this is the part one. This is a very lengthy topic. So I will create separate video for convenience. So first we will see the introduction of this act. Let's start with the introduction. So what happened in the time of World War II? There was acute shortage of accommodation in the major cities and urban areas of India. So, due to acute housing shortage in cities, there was possibility of charging of exorbitant rents to tenants and also ultimate eviction of poor tenants. So, unnecessary, there was a hike in the rents. So the poor people was very much affected. So to prevent exploitation of tenants by landlords, the Bombay Rent Restriction Act was enacted for the first time in the year of 1938 as a temporary measure for 2-year period. So initially they came up with a rent restriction act in Bombay in the year of 1938. So you have to remember this. Then the said act was thereafter substantially modified in year 1947, and the said act was made applicable to several urban areas of Maharashtra and Gujarat. So initially the act was enforced in Bombay. Then they made this act in you can say Gujarat and Maharashtra. So initially in these cities the act was come into existence. So we will study the act in Gujarat, Maharashtra and Bombay. But this act was made by state government. So every state has different provisions according to the state. For the study point of view, we will study these acts only. But when you will practice, you have to follow your local codes, local acts. So it was named Bombay Rents Hotel and Lodging House Rents Control Act of 1947. So this was the name of initial act. So I hope the background is clear. This temporary act, initially having effect for 5 years, was extended from time to time at least 20 times till 1998. So the initial plan was for 5 years. After 5 years, they extended the period, and they have extended the period for 20 times. So it exists. Two fundamental provisions made in this act was rent payable by tenants was frozen as on 1/9/1940. So जो रेंट 1940 में था वो एक जो रेंट था वो फ्रोजन कर दिया गया, और रेंट फिक्स्ड एंड चार्ज एट द टाइम ऑफ फर्स्ट लेटिंग. सो दो कंडीशन थी इसमें, या तो आपने जिस रेंट पे पहली बार अपना घर दिया है वो, या 1940 के टाइम पे जो रेंट था वो. टेनेंट्स and after his death, even his heirs could not be ordinarily evicted from the rented premises if tenant is ready and willing to pay standard rent to the landlord. So the tenant, and after his son or daughter or any legal heir, they were also protected in this act. So the landlord was helpless. He was not able to evict the tenants. So this was the introduction. So there was some exceptions for this act. The exceptions are mentioned in the section 3 of Maharashtra Rent Control Act. So what was the exemption? So this act shall not apply to any premises belonging to government. So government bodies के पास जो premises थे उनके लिए ये applicable नहीं था. And to any premises let or sublet to banks or any public sector undertaking or any corporation established by or under any central or state act or foreign missions, international agencies, multiple companies and private limited companies and public limited companies having a paid up share capital of ₹1 crore or more. So आप ऐसे समझ सकते हैं कि सिंपल भाषा में कि जिन भी कंपनीज का कैपिटल जो था वो 1 करोड़ या उससे ज्यादा था, उन पर ये एक्ट जो था वो लागू नहीं था. ना ही किसी पब्लिक लिमिटेड कंपनी पे ये लागू था, ना ही किसी इंटरनेशनल एजेंसी पे ये लागू था. सो जो एक्ट था उसके ये एग्जेम्पशन हम डिस्कस कर रहे हैं. द इफेक्ट ऑफ दिस प्रोविजन विल बी दैट लैंडलॉर्ड्स विल बी एबल टू charge market rent to all those tenants who lost protection of the Rent Act under section 3(1)(b). Okay, so all public limited companies with paid up capital of 1 crore or more will have to pay market rent. So जो बड़ी कंपनियां थी उनको तो मार्केट रेंट देना ही पड़ता था. Then even if they were paying very low controlled standard rent for the rented premises up to 31/3/2000. So 31/3/2000 तक वो बहुत कम रेंट दे रहे थे, बट इस एक्ट के अंडर उनको एग्जेम्प्ट किया और उनसे जो है मार्केट रेंट लिया गया. दिस वैल्यू ऑफ प्रॉपर्टीज ऑक्यूपाइड बाय सच टेनेंट्स विल इंक्रीज सब्सटेंशियली इन ओपन मार्केट. Cases of all these tenants will be governed by provisions of the Transfer of Property Act 1982. We will study Transfer of Property Act also in our further lectures. For now, you just remember the name Transfer of Property Act 1982 and not by the Rent Act. So the companies or the bodies are exempted from this act under section 3 was governed under this act, Transfer of Property Act 1982. So the standard rent was not applicable to those companies. So clear, section 3 and section 6 of Maharashtra Rent Control Act, these are two exemptions. So section 6 is very complicated and it is written in the terms of law. So what I have done, I have studied this section and I have made a separate PPT for separate slide for you to understand it better. First we will understand this point so you can understand the section 6 which is written here automatically. So what section 6 says, from the start of this act, rules about standard rent and permitted increase do not apply to a property if it has been vacant for a continuous period of 1 year, even if it was rented before. So मान लीजिए कोई प्रॉपर्टी है जो 1 साल के लिए खाली रह गई है, भले ही वो पहले रेंट पे दी गई हो, वो इस रेंट कंट्रोल एक्ट के अंडर नहीं आएगी. सेक्शन 6 ये बात बोलता है. इफ a property stays empty for 1 full year, the landlord is no longer bound by standard rent rule for the property. So if the property is vacant for 1 year, standard rent does not apply. Earlier, before the 1999 Act, the rent control was tied to the property itself. So इससे पहले क्या था, जो रेंट कंट्रोल एक्ट था वो एक बार जिस प्रॉपर्टी पे लागू हो गया वो हमेशा रहता था. So rent stayed frozen no matter who lived there. So it was not tied to the tenant, it was tied to the property itself. So it was very difficult. Now rent control is tied to the tenant and the vacancy period not permanently to the property. So what happened? The vacancy period decides the rent control act apply or not, and the tenant. Okay, earlier landlords cannot raise rent when the tenant changed. पहले क्या होता था, भले ही टेनेंट बदल जाता था लेकिन रेंट वही रहता था. Now if the landlord keeps the property vacant for 1 year, they can charge market rent to a new tenant instead of their old frozen rent. I hope the section 6 is clear. I have written in short, if the landlord leaves a property empty for 1 year, rent control ends and they can charge market rent to the next tenant. Now if you will read this section, you can understand it properly. So I am not reading it, I have covered this section in this slide. Okay, so now we will see some definitions which is mentioned in the section 7 of this act. So the definitions are very easy, just we have to read them, you can understand them. So what section 3 of this act says? This act says the landlord. Who is the landlord? Any person entitled to receive rent of any premises let to tenant. So कोई व्यक्ति जो रेंट लेता है, रेंट प्राप्त करता है किसी premises के अगेंस्ट, वो लैंडलॉर्ड हो जाता है. सेक्शन 7(5) says a licensee, the definition of licensee, person who is in occupation of premises under subsisting agreement for license but does not include paying guest. So this section 7(5) clearly says that a paying guest PG is not a licensee. Okay, who is the licensee? Who lives there, who occupy the property. Okay, then section 7(9) it defines premises. So what is premises? Any building or part of building letting, building let or given on license. So, जो भी बिल्डिंग है जिसको लाइसेंस पे आपने दिया है टेनेंट को, वो premises कहलाएगा. सेक्शन 7(14) talks about standard rent. So please focus here. This standard rent is very important, and this will come in one of the approach for the valuation, and also the definition of standard rent is very important. So one MCQ I am hoping that come from here. Standard rent means standard rent fixed by court. Point number A. Point number B has two sub clauses. First is rent at which premises were let on 1st October 1987 or thereafter. What other condition is? Whether premises were not let on, where premises were not let on 1/10/1987, the rent at which they were last let before the date plus one-time increase of 5% of said rent. So this defines the standard rent. Okay, what this says, either the standard rent will be fixed by court or the rent which was fixed on 1st October 1987 or 1st of October 1987 plus the 5% increase in the said rent. Okay, So these are the three conditions for standard rent. What was the effect of this clause 714 happened? We will study. So what was the effect? Effect is that maintainable rent to be adopted for rental method of valuation should be same as rent fixed on date of the first letting. So what was the effect? This was the effect. However, for premises let before 1st October 1987, original rent could not increase by 5% of such basic rent. So this clause limit the increment to 5% only. Okay, so standard rent is very important. Please remember this. Okay, now we will move further. Then we will come to section 715. This define a tenant. Who is the tenant? Person by whom rent is payable for any premises. It include deemed tenant as prescribed under section 15A of repealed act. जो एक्ट अब फोर्स में नहीं है बट उसका सेक्शन 15A जिनको टेनेंट मानता था वो भी इस क्लॉज के अंदर टेनेंट कहलाएंगे. रेंट कंट्रोल एक्ट ऑफ 1947 विथ अमेंडमेंट अंडर महाराष्ट्र एक्ट 18 ऑफ 1987. सो आप ऐसा समझ सकते हैं कि जो पुराने लॉज में टेनेंट थे वो भी इस लॉ के अंडर टेनेंट कहलाएंगे. ओके, ये यहाँ पे जो है टेनेंट की डेफिनेशन है. आप ऐसे याद रख सकते हैं, पर्सन बाय हूम रेंट इज पेएबल फॉर एनी प्रीमाइसेस इज टेनेंट. ओके, फॉर सिंपल वर्ड. इट आल्सो इंक्लूड्स सब टेनेंट इन ऑक्यूपेशन prior to 1968 as laid under section 25 of 1999 act. It also includes a member of the family residing with the tenant at the time of his death. मान लीजिए किसी टेनेंट की डेथ होती है, उस समय पर उसका अगर कोई फैमिली मेंबर वहां पर रह रहा हो, जरूरी नहीं है वो उसका उत्तराधिकारी हेयर हो, उसको भी आप टेनेंट मानेंगे अकॉर्डिंग टू दिस एक्ट. ओके, so for today that's all. We will continue this act in our next session also, and there we will see some more sections and some more definition of this act, and we will see what is the effect of rent control act on the property being valued. So thank you. I will create some MCQs once the topic gets completed. So thank you. Please like and subscribe the video, and please mention if you have any doubt. I will try to clarify that. So bye bye. Thank you.